You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building, Tallahassee Mayor.
What's up?
Andrew Gillum. Did I say that right?
Gillum.
Gillum.
He added an I.
Gillum.
Wow. Gillum.
That's it.
You can tell he's from Florida right
That's
now.
it. Miami.
You born and raised in Florida?
I am. Richmond Heights.
I always say the craziest people come from the Bronx and all of Florida.
Come on, man. Not all of Florida.
You have to admit, people from Florida are a little off.
No.
Just a little bit.
No. No more than any place else. We just got 20 million people, so it feels that way. But it's a great state. I call it home. Started from the bottom, as I say, and now in Tallahassee, Florida, literally the top of the state. Raised in an area called Richmond Heights, South Dade. Born in Jackson Memorial Hospital, one of 7 kids. One of my brothers is here with us this morning, and all boys, 1 girl, my baby sister, who's actually in law school here at Cardozo. And obviously I'm now in this race for governor.
How'd you get into politics?
I was
from the hoods of Florida.
Well, that's right. I mean, I came to Florida A&M University, shout out to FAMU, to attend college. And when I was a student at FAM, it was the same.
Hampton University bus fams you asked every time we played.
Well, Hampton.
We actually played them homecoming, bust their ass. But go ahead, continue.
That's a rare situation, but we getting all right together. Know that we beat y'all more than y'all beat us.
Probably right.
That's for sure. But from FAMU, when I was a student at FAM, that was when Republicans took control in my state, and they did everything from eliminating affirmative action to trying to tier FAMU in the third bottom tier with the fewest resources. And so we were constantly protesting. We were constantly up at the Capitol, constantly trying to, similar to, maybe students at Howard might be, the other HU, by the way.
Oh, the real HU.
Yeah, well, there it is. But, they're situated in the nation's capital. And so when something happens that affects Black people particularly, there's an expectation that it's students there that will rise up and be the very present voice. And in Florida, FAMU was that and is that, I think, for the state of Florida. So we were always sort of in the political space. So I decided to run for city commission after I graduated. I was 23 years old, ran for a seat that was roughly, the electorate was almost 70% white. Nobody thought we had a chance of winning, including my mama, who gave me $20 of a campaign contribution and told me not to spend it all in one place.
Everything helps.
Everything helps, man. Everything helps. And that is quite magical. We didn't raise a lot of money. But we ended up winning that race, making me the youngest person in Tallahassee's history to serve on the city council.
It was like 20-something, right?
23.
I was 23. Wow.
Why do you think you
23.
won that race?
You know what? We organized. I got to tell you. I mean, if I didn't learn anything else, and fighting all those battles, even as students with lawmakers and the legislature and the governor at that time, it was Jeb Bush. It was how you organize people, and so we did dorm storms. We showed up at people's dorm rooms, knocked on the door. Our strategy. That's it.
Maybe normally didn't vote.
And everybody kept saying, "What are you doing? Paying attention? Why are you on campus? The students don't vote." 9 students voted on the campus of FSU in the previous election.
Wow.
We're like, we're going to turn the heat up on that, and we did something called knock and drag. We knocked on doors and dragged people out, literally, dragged them out to go vote, and we created our own electorate, if you will.
We need that now, by the way.
Say that again?
I feel like we need that now, by the way.
We absolutely need it now, not just in local races, but even at the national race, at the national level. Imagine what the outcome of the election could have been had communities, young people included, and others shown up in real numbers to frankly let our voices be heard.
We need our own tea party. We need like a cognac party, and all the Black and brown people come together, and we just vote in these big blocks all throughout the country.
I thought you were going to say Hennessy.
Cognac.
Well, a version of. There are lots of them.
I like Remy, though, so it's all
okay. All right.
It's all cognac.
Remy, you age yourself with Remy. Every time I hear Remy, I think of a certain person.
It's me.
Not you.
It's funny you said that because my father-in-law put me on Remy.
Okay, well then that's why.
Yeah. I lost a woman to FAMU too, man. I just want to say that. I'm being honest. I used to date this guy. I got to say this just to get it out. This woman that I dated before my wife, she left. She went to FAMU.
Nice.
And she was a virgin when she went to FAMU. And I drove down there one time for the weekend, and all of a sudden she wanted to have sex, and I was like, "Yep, this goddamn FAMU." And I looked around that campus, and I said, "Yeah, I ain't gonna keep this one. I can't compete. I can't compete with all these wild Florida boys."
Come on, man, get out of here. Listen, it's hard to compete with a rattler, and that's okay.
Man,
I will tell you, FAMU, I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school of the kids and the first to go to college. And I ended up at FAMU, frankly, after watching A Different World. I mean, I grew up on watching that show, A Different World, right?
Different World.
Same deal, right? I mean, there's something to be said for the power of seeing yourself reflected, right?
Right. We always were just talking about that, how important it is to see somebody like you on TV.
Absolutely.
And to have those role models. And one thing we've been talking a lot about, too, is actually running for office, because a lot of people don't feel like they're even qualified to run for office or that they could even potentially win. But it's so important for us to be in offices, even if we have to start at the bottom,
That's
locally, whatever it is that you have to do so that you can represent for your people.
That's right. I mean, and consider locally, it sounds like, starting low, but I'm mayor of a city that has a nearly $800 million
when you were
budget,
23
right?
years old.
At 23, but I thought I could win for sure. Nobody else did. But the truth is after I got there for a while, I was doubting myself as to whether or not I had the skill sets, the background to be there. And in fact, there was this one elderly woman at one church service on this one Sunday, and she said, "You're Gillum," and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she came up to me and she said, "I'm so disappointed." And I said, "What I do?" And again, I'm used to now people saying, "You're so glad you're up there. This is that and the third." And she says, "I watch that meeting every Wednesday, and I listen for what it is you have to say. And week after week after week, you don't say nothing." And she was right. I felt like I needed to coax into it, right? Not jumping out there trying to, speak my piece on everything. And she said, "I knew you were young when I voted for you, but I wanted you there anyway." And it was like a light switch being turned on. And the truth is, we have to be honest about the fact that sometimes when we find ourselves in these positions of power, you're looking for validation in what it is that you do and what you say and making sure that people are supportive of you. And
it stops you from doing the work.
Yeah, it does stop you from doing the work, and it stops you from being your most authentic self. And when she told me that, I was like, you know what? She's right. I have an experience. I have a lived experience that I need to be able to reflect. And it was a light switch coming on, and it's not stopped since.
How hard is politics? Because we talk about Oprah and people are playing with the fact that she might be running for president.
Yeah.
How difficult is politics?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of elements to it. I will tell you right now, the difficult challenge that I have is the fact that I'm running to be the governor of the third largest state in America, and I'm the only non-millionaire in the race. And by the way, it's not because I don't want to be a millionaire. It's just because I'm not, which means I got to do this thing differently. But money plays a huge role in politics, and you often find, elected officials who then do the bidding of the people who are, financing them, and not necessarily the bidding of people. And so I think what you always have to remind yourself is why you get elected, why you're there to serve, and to be very clear about what it is that you want to accomplish. The person I don't want to ever see elected is the one who says, "I just want to be an elected official." The one I want to see elected is the one who says, "Look, I grew up this way, and these are the issues that I see in my community. The neighborhood is busted.
Right.
Every time I see law enforcement in my neighborhood is to arrest somebody. I want to do better, and I want to see my community do better, and I think I have something to contribute." That's the person that I'd like to see
Public service.
elected. Public service, which we've increasingly gotten away from.
What do you think Florida needs right now? If you have to say these are the issues, because I see you focus a lot on the kids.
Absolutely.
And making sure that they have something to do outside of school and fixing the education system as well.
Well, it is huge. So, I mean, I grew up in Miami and matriculated all the way through the public system, K through 12, obviously a state university system for college. In my state, roughly 47% of the people there say that they cannot make ends meet at the end of the month. So they're working. In fact, they're working harder than ever and still can't pay their bills. Why? Because we largely have a low-wage economy in my state. We have a governor who decided not to extend Medicaid, right? 1.5 million of the most medically needy people who don't have access to health care because we got a governor who philosophically disagreed with Barack Obama and therefore decided not to do it. We have a governor who right now and a legislature who refers to our schools as failure factories and our teachers as evil. Right. And so when I was growing up in Florida, while we didn't have while college worked for me, for my older brothers, it was getting a skill, monetizing that skill that they could get a job that led to a career where they could make a good wage for themselves and for their families. We have all but pushed out of the public education system apprenticeships, pipelining,
trades,
trades, woodwork, electrical, mechanical, all those skills that, frankly, in my opinion, are critical.
Yeah, what happened to shop class? What happened to home economics?
Gone. They replaced it with high-stakes tests, which don't tell us what our kids know, but how well they take a test, right? And so in my opinion, it's imperative that we have a governor who understands that experience, that lived experience of people in our state, and are prepared to do something to shift up the game a little bit in such a way that, one, if you're not on a college-bound track, you should be able to get a skill that leads to a job, that then leads to a career that pays a good wage. If you're going to college, you should be able to graduate without coming from under a mountain of debt. If you choose Florida as your home and you get caught up in the criminal justice system, you should be able to pay your debt to society, make your way back into society, and make a good life for yourself. But unfortunately, we have an unforgiving criminal justice system, right? I talk unapologetically about the fact that I've got brothers who got felony records for drug sales. And when they got out, I had a very difficult time trying to get a job. And so both my brothers who found themselves in that situation now own their own businesses. And people say, man, you got such entrepreneurial. If you ask them, they're not entrepreneur. They had to eat. They had to feed their kids. They had to feed their wives and their family. And so how do we create a criminal justice reform system and a society that doesn't punish people perpetually for a mistake?
I think we have to turn those facilities into actual correctional facilities. We call them correctional facilities, but what are we doing to correct people? I think that we should have trades in school. You should be able to really get a real education that means something. That's right. Like a degree that means something when you come home.
That's right. I totally agree. I mean, and there are some simple ways to do it. It's not like we're starting from zero. What it requires is somebody who's intentioned toward making that happen. Mm-hmm. But it isn't rocket science on how it is that you reinfuse trades and apprenticeships back in the educational system. How do we train this generation of workers for technology-related jobs, right? So we know, and the Obama administration put a major spotlight on this, that a lot of the issue that we have in this country with job placement is skills gap. Mm-hmm. So you've got jobs, and we did a survey just in my city. We saw that we had on average about 550 jobs that were being advertised for anywhere between 10 and 12 months. Now, every time I go to the barbershop, y'all probably don't think I go often because my hair is, little fade. I got an edge.
Not me.
Hey, I got an edge. Hey, my brother keeps telling me I need to go ahead and commit fully. But
I see what you're doing. You're easing down to the balding. You're easing to the balding.
Hey, listen, I'm trying to stay married, man. I got to, phase it in, give my wife a chance to adjust. But every week I go to the barbershop, in or out, somebody's talking about the need for a job. Yep. And so I'm saying we got these jobs that are being advertised for almost a year without people having the skills to walk into it. And so in my city, we created this program called the IO Avenue, where we're training folks, mid-career professionals, people who may already have a job but want to make sure that they don't get skilled out of their profession, and equipping them with the knowledge and the skills and the tools that they need to then walk into some of these positions that are right now available. That's not just a challenge in my city. Frankly, it's not just my challenge in Florida. It's a challenge all over the country. Mm-hmm. But it takes a governor as well who's intentioned around how do we create that kind of program, that all jobs are not necessarily created equal, that yes, we're going to have a service sector, and that's great. No shame to that. Mm-hmm. But why shouldn't we be also trying to create the jobs of the future? I live in the Sunshine State. Yet our contribution to solar energy is de minimis at best because big industry runs roughshod over the process, and therefore we haven't made those investments. Well, I want to make the Sunshine State mean something again. Let's build solar farms. Let's make sure that we equip people with what it means to build photovoltaic. We should be exporters of major energy, right? A leader state. Mm-hmm. And we just haven't, we've not really leaned into that challenge. And those are some of the things that certainly drive me and make me passionate about it, because I think not only is it good and right for the environment and otherwise, but it's also good for the economy. Right. There are jobs in that sector.
Yeah, I saw you tweeting about how we should legalize marijuana and use the money to fix up Florida's public schools.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we've seen the damage that over-criminalization has done, particularly as it relates to marijuana use, marijuana sales, obviously. Obviously, the law of the land is what it is, and we have to enforce the law as it exists. However, I think cities all across the country should be looking at ways to decriminalize certain forms. And so our law enforcement agencies use discretion. If they pull you over and you got a roach, typically the standard thing is to, criminalize you, arrest you, book you, and create a criminal record profile on you. And we're saying, is that really the way in which we fight crime in our city?
All right, give me a break.
Or
let's just fine and keep it moving.
Or we could say that we're going to have some compassion around this whole issue and recognize that these aren't the folks who are creating real criminal element in our city, that there are other real criminal elements in our city, that if you weren't focused 30 minutes writing a citation on a roach, maybe you could actually be dealing with the folks who breaking and entering and committing violent crime, right? And so this is simply a question of where our priorities are. And unfortunately, we have an Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. His intention is to continue to criminalize. In fact, even go after cities that followed Obama precedent rules when it came to decriminalization and saying, no, we're throwing those rules out. We want to prosecute these cases to the fullest extent of the law.
Where are the celebrities? Or where are your T-Pains and your Plies and your Ross and these artists from Florida? Are they backing you? Are they behind you?
I sure hope so. We're obviously we've been focused a lot on our primary voters, many of them older voters in our state. But it's my intention to try to recruit as much support as I possibly can from those folks. I will tell
Black
you
was
that
a big contributor of your campaign, right?
Say it again.
Kodak Black, he contributed financially to your
Indeed.
campaign, right?
No.
No, he
what
didn't.
did you wait? Kodak Blackie. I'm sorry. You know who I was? You know who I thought about?
You just fell into that.
Do you wanna, yeah, you trapped me, man. We got 14,000 contributions. I think you tried to trap me on that one. We got 14,000 contributions.
I didn't mean to do the good brother like that. I thought you was quicker than that.
No. Listen.
I got a cousin with that name in South Florida.
Name Kodak Black?
Well, you know that street name. That's not that's not real. You're trying to get me in trouble. This is.
but you know, talking about contributions.
Yeah.
You know, it for a lot of people, it bothers them that you are not a quote unquote millionaire because you have to take a lot of contributions. And usually when people take contributions, they lean towards people and you owe people. So how do we know that's not going to happen with you?
Well, I mean, I've been elected now 15 years, and I've taken contributions, accepted contributions from a wide range of individuals. I do look at contributions differently. I think when somebody takes their hard-earned money, and mind you, we're talking about folks who are giving us, by and large, $5, $20, $50, $100, right? I'll take that any day of the week. Mm-hmm. When those people sow into you, not only are you almost guaranteed to get their vote, they're likely to recruit their friends. They're going to volunteer and organize. They're going to knock on doors. They're going to be the best supporters you've got out there because they've sowed a seed into you. I think our issue is, certainly in our community, is, we're used to tithing. We're used to giving to the church. Right. We're used to giving to those kinds of causes, maybe our fraternities and sororities. But when it comes to giving politically, it's like, I don't do that. I stay out of that.
So we've been taught not to trust politicians.
Well, there's that, but then how do we make demands, right?
Yeah,
how do we say I'm as much your constituent as anybody else? And not only that, but I've sowed not only a vote into you, I've sowed a small seed into you. I'm one of your contributors, one of your supporters. When people contribute to me, know this. What you're buying into is our vision. What you're buying into is what our plan is to improve our community, our city, our state. What you're not buying into is you're not buying my vote. That's not how it works. That's not how the democratic process works. And if you have a question about that, research the 15 years that I've been in service, and you'll go to see that I voted against people who have given me lots of money by way of political support and contributions because I simply disagreed fundamentally with what it is that they wanted to see achieved. Mm-hmm. But you know what? They still give them because they know where I am. Mm-hmm. They know where I am. They know that there's an ethic there that they can believe and they can trust in. But I think our problem is that we actually don't do enough political giving, and we ought to do more of it.
The Tampa Bay Times reported that, and this is a real one, you received a $100,000 donation from George Soros, the billionaire.
They were $150,000 off.
Oh,
they've given us $250,000, and I'll tell you, I've known the Soros family, and in my work when I worked for Norman Lear, they funded a lot of the civic engagement work that I was in charge of. What I value about their investment is that the investments that they made in me philanthropically were around reflective democracy. It's around how do we get more people of color and more women elected into public service. It was how do we take candidates who can't finance their own races and make sure that they have the resources to compete. Aramis Ayala, who is the first elected state attorney in black woman in Florida, had the support of George Soros. The state attorney over in Hillsborough County who got elected had the support of George Soros. He took out an incumbent who had a horrible criminal justice record and track record. And so what I'm saying is if our value set can align, by God, absolutely. I'd love for you to pour an investment into me. What you have to know, though, is that what you're getting is my vision and what I believe in. And if we're simpatico, we agree with each other on that, then we're all in. And if not, then maybe you might regret your investment in me later. But yes, I mean, I'm pleased to have it. In fact, I wish there were more like him.
I wish he'd have gave you more. He's a billionaire. What's a mill gonna hurt him?
Don't be counting his money, man.
I'm not, but I'm just saying.
I can't count his coins, but I do hear he's well off, and I hope they will continue to make support in our race.
Having been in politics as long as you have, when Donald Trump won, what did that make you feel like?
Well, it's a gut punch. I was like, I can't believe that this is the country we live in, coming on the heels of the most historic election that we had seen in this country with the election of President Barack Obama. I had no doubt that we were going to continue progress forward. But the truth is over the course of history, we've seen these moments where we make huge, gigantic steps. And then we go backwards, it feels. What I will appreciate about this past election is that it really has awoken a giant in a lot of people who previously thought maybe my vote doesn't matter. Maybe they're all just alike. I hope that if you had that assessment before, you recognize that elections have consequences. Mm-hmm. We now have a president who is unabashedly racist. We now have and almost in shame, to show it, right, based off his comments and what he said about the people of Haiti, what he said about the continent of Africa, although I'm not sure he thinks it's a continent, since he refers to Africa as if it's one location. In fact, it's diverse throughout the length and the breadth of it. Nonetheless, we've got a president who doesn't respect women. We have a president who is more akin to, for a fourth grader, and no offense to any fourth graders, with his temperament than anything, right? And so we got to recognize that elections have consequences and are requiring of us to get engaged, to get involved, to show up, to show out through our votes. Our votes are our voices. And when we silence our vote, we also silence our voice in the process. But I appreciate that people are becoming more aware and more awoke to the consequences that elections have on society, on our everyday lives.
Now, what is the fair share for Florida's future?
Yeah, the fair share for Florida's future is a tax proposal that we laid out a couple of weeks ago. If y'all recall, when President Trump and the Republicans in Congress pushed through their tax proposal, creating a huge windfall for many of the wealthiest corporations and individuals in the country. In my state, we have a corporate tax. The truth is only 3% of corporations in the state of Florida pay corporate taxes. 3%. They also happen to be the wealthiest corporations in the state. This windfall that they got from President Trump and the Republicans in Congress created about a $6.3 billion windfall for the top 3% corporations. And what we've said is that can the people of Florida get $1 billion of that? And with that $1 billion, we plan to use that $1 billion to increase teacher starting salary to $50,000 for starting salary. Right now, the state of Florida is among the lowest starting salaries for teaching professionals in the country. We then said, can we take some of that money and put it into high-quality early childhood education? Why? Because 90% of brain development that happens over the course of human life, from the point that you're born to the point that you die, 90% of your brain is developed between the ages of 0 and 5. In my state, roughly 40% of the kids are showing up at kindergarten not ready to learn. Nearly that same percentage by the time they get to third grade are not on grade level reading. Many of these kids, black and brown kids and poor white kids. And so what we're saying is, can we put a little bit of that money into increasing high quality early learning, because we want to make sure that every kid, no matter where they comes from, gets their fair shot. And then finally, what we've said is, can we take some of that money and put it into the crumbling public school infrastructure in our state, where you got kids who you want to be motivated to learn, but they get there and they got mold in classrooms, right? You don't have AC units, or they're out. Teachers are having to go into their own pocket to buy school supplies, right? This is a travesty. The public education system is a contract that exists between the government and its people, that regardless of who you are, where you come from, what your mother or father did, that every kid in our country and in our state ought to have an equal opportunity to learn. And that's not true anymore. And so how do we make that true again? So our the fair tax piece is that everybody pay their fair share. In Florida, right now, we have regressive taxes. Sales taxes is the predominant form of tax that happens, and that's a consumer tax. Yet private jets, yachts, all that other stuff, we built in huge tax breaks for many of those. But for regular, everyday working people, we're paying our fair share. But we're not getting our fair share of, frankly, the largesse that our state gets to benefit from. And all we're saying is everybody's got to pay their share to make sure that this state thrives.
And you've helped lower violent crime in the city by more than 10%. And this is just common sense to me, and I don't know why people don't do more of it. It was simply through increased investments in law enforcement.
Law enforcement, but not just law enforcement in the sake of hiring more officers to arrest more people, but hiring more officers to do community policing. When I was growing up in South Dade, we knew officers by name. Mm-hmm. They reflected the community. Right. They would come, my grandmother would sit on her rocking chair and carry on a 30-minute conversation with the law enforcement officer. We run past them like it wasn't nothing because...
It shouldn't be your only interaction.
That's exactly... You were not afraid. Mm-hmm. You were not afraid, and your only interaction wasn't always a bad interaction, right? We had a different outlook on that, and unfortunately, we've gotten so far away from it. So what we said is, we're going to incentivize community policing. We're going to hire more officers so that we can put more folks in areas where they can build relationships with communities and the folks who live in those communities. The other thing that we did, and I'm extremely proud of this, I started this program called Community Connections, which is a restorative justice process. Mm-hmm. It takes first-time nonviolent young people under the 18 and under for nonviolent offenses. And instead of them going before a judge and being told that they've committed some crime against the inanimate state of Florida, they don't know the state of Florida. They ain't touched her. They don't know how she feels. They don't know anything about that, but they're told that they've committed some crime against her. And the recidivism rate for folks who are adjudicated through the normal justice process is about 40% of them go on to recidivate. We created a program called Community Connections where instead of going before a judge in a court of law, you go before a community panel, Ms. Jackson, Ms. Jefferson, the principal, maybe a teacher, maybe a law enforcement officer, maybe the victim, maybe the victim's family, and you get told how the actions you did affected us. Wow. And what we've learned is that over 90% of our kids over the same observation period as the state uses never go on to recidivate over that period, right? Not because they're brilliant or because we're any more brilliant. It's because we're trying to lean into smart justice.
Yeah, that's
right?
like a human issue.
It's a humane, absolutely. It pierces, right? It makes sense. It's like, man, yeah, I hate to disappoint Miss Jackson. I got to see her every day, right? Or whomever. And there's a different level of human connection that takes place. This concept is known as restorative justice. To your point, Charlamagne, how do we restore through the criminal justice process? Not just detain, not remove from society and create, strong, resentful men and women, but how do we restore them with something that when they get out, they got some usefulness for themselves. They can apply themselves. The other thing I did in my city with the support of my colleagues is we banned the box. We don't ask about criminal background history when you apply for a job with the city of Tallahassee, unless answering yes to having had a criminal background history is a disqualifier for a job. If it isn't a disqualifier, we're going to measure you on your merit. Are you qualified? Will you make a good employee? Will you help this team? Be a good team member. And what we've learned is that some of those folks, the hardest working individuals we have in our government because they know what it means to be without, right?
You said a lot just now.
These are processes we got to scale up.
Now, also with Florida has a lot of immigrants.
Of course.
From all over. So how do you feel about Trump trying to deport a lot of these immigrants and getting them out of the country? Because Florida is a huge population is immigrants.
We have a lot of immigrants in our state. In fact, it's funny you mentioned because the Speaker of the Florida House decided to send a letter to the United States Secretary of Homeland Security last week asking them to investigate me for being a sanctuary city. Now, there is no legal definition of a sanctuary city. It's a term that ultra-conservatives use to say something about us. I will tell you this about my city. If you come to the city of Tallahassee or into Leon County and you break the law, you will have to pay whatever the consequence is of having broken the law. But what we don't do in my city is we don't criminalize people off their personhood because of the color of your skin or the language that you speak. And by the way, that's unconstitutional. And there's precedence for it being unconstitutional. And so my point to my Republican colleagues has been, yes, we deserve a comprehensive immigration reform for the 20 million undocumented people who call this country home. We need it, and it needs to happen in Washington, D.C. But if you're serious about cracking down on illegal immigration in this country, why don't you begin by fining the corporations who take advantage of the labor of undocumented people and don't pay them fairly, don't treat them fairly? Fine those corporations $15,000 a day per individual per offense. They'll never do it. You bring it to a halt, by the way, immediately if we did that.
Instead, they want to run up in 7-Elevens.
Absolutely. They won't do that. They won't do that, Angela, because they're not actually serious about bringing this issue under some control. They're interested in maligning and dividing and basically criminalizing folks for who they are. I'm not going to fall prey to that. I'm not going to fall susceptible to that. That's not who we are as a country. That's not who we are as a community. And it's my hope through the course of this election, we're going to make the point very, very clear that we're united in this whole thing, and that Republicans are going to have to get their votes otherwise, not by turning us against one another, right? That's a page from Donald Trump's playbook, and I'm not interested.
I want to go back to what you was talking about with the community panels, because that struck me, because at first I was thinking, like, nah, some people need to go to jail. But then I'm like, nah, some people just really need to know somebody cares.
Absolutely. I think that's, man, why do we divorce ourselves from our very human instincts when it comes to crime and justice? I mean, it's no different than how you or I or any of us in this room might want to feel when it is that we've made a mistake and we don't want to be the baby thrown out with the bathwater.
Yes.
You know you've done wrong sometimes. And the truth is that every one of us have, right? We've all fallen short in our own respective ways. And for some people, it's even worse than falling short. It is that you were born into a situation and into a set of circumstances that every single day, this is the life that you saw. This was the example that was set for you. Just as you and I compared notes about you going to Hampton and me going to FAMU because of a different world, that's the image that we got to grow up looking at. That's what we saw. For some people, it's drug-addicted mom, maybe absent dad, trading between which home, grandmama house, auntie house, cousin house down the street.
Minister Society, Boys in the Hood.
All
juice.
of it, man. All of it. And so we got to, at some level, start to re-educate, right, our kids. That's why I've leaned into programs like the 1,000 Mentor Initiative that I've launched in my city to try to get loving, caring adults in front of our youth to say, you know what, young man, I expect great things of you. You don't even know what those great things are, but brother, I'm looking at you and your future is so bright, right? I want you to spend a day with me in the mayor's office. I want you to see what that's like. Or if you're a teacher, bring this young man out to the soccer game over the weekend. Show them a different experience. Even in my own city, I was shocked to learn how many of our kids never stepped foot on the campus of FAMU or Florida State University, right? And all that takes is somebody who cares enough to bring them along.
Absolutely.
Right? And you never know the kind of transformational power you can have on an individual just by the power of your example.
And it works.
Right?
I've had that happen to
works.
me. Like, I have a extensive criminal record, but it was constantly adults in my life who were like, no, you got a bright future. You're wasting your potential, showing me different things. Right. And that does have an impact on
Totally has an impact. And we can't give up on our youth in that way, right? We can't they're too young. And we're already treating them like they're adults.
Absolutely.
And like that, they're too young. They're kids. I watch my own kids. And that's why I feel so passionately about it, that I'm setting an example for them. I watch my kids. They're not reading age. I got a set of 3-year-old twins and an 8-month-old. And because we have a habit of reading to our kids at night, my kids, when we're not in the room and we're just sort of watching or we're listening on the camera, my wife and I see them on the camera holding the book and they're making up their own stories, right? As they turn the page. And Caroline is mimicking what she heard her mama say to me. And Jackson's mimicking back what he heard me say back to their mother, right? The power of example is amazing. And it doesn't have to be the parent that you're born to that sets that example necessarily. It's my hope that be your first example, your first teacher. But if it isn't, there's a role that we all as a society and community can play. And that's why community justice is so important to me.
So it's not in my mind, because I always tell kids, like, they're not giving y'all the same chances to make mistakes the way they did with us. Like, I think about the charges that I had back in the day. I'd be under the jail.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're doing to these kids now.
Absolutely.
Back then, it was like they was giving us chances.
Absolutely. My sister worked for 8 years almost for the Southern Poverty Law Center, working on juvenile justice reform in the state of Alabama and the state of Georgia and the state of Florida. And it was, I served on this education foundation where we were trying to push a ban on out-of-school suspensions, right? Because as y'all know, you spend 10 days out, you can't graduate. You don't get the opportunity to move to the next level. So you now have these kids who are at embarrassing ages to be in certain grades that they're in, and then they drop out, right? And so to your point, Charlamagne, around, the fact that we used to actually give some chances. If you messed up, the last thing they were doing was sending you home. You were going to detention, or you were staying at school. You were under somebody's watchful eye, right? And now it is just as simple to get rid of them, push them out. In fact, they're a drain on the test scores. So it's best to have them out since schools are being measured on how well they perform on these tests. So you're right. We don't have the kind of compassion within our criminal justice system that we need. And by the way, this isn't just soft talk. This is economic talk. The amount of money we spend criminalizing, adjudicating through the judiciary process, detaining in our juvenile jails or in our jail and prison systems is an embarrassingly staggering sum when you compare what it might spend to interrupt that child's life with more restorative work to put them on a trajectory that they can be full-fledged contributing members to society. They don't even compare by way of price. They don't even compare. So that's what I mean by smart justice practice, and why I think we as a society have to grow into it, but more importantly, why it's important that we get elected to this office here in Florida so that we can transform the third largest state in all of America and hopefully set an example for others around the country.
Now, before we go, we got to talk about gun violence.
Yes.
Because you're from Florida, the Sunshine State, but they call it the Gunshine State. Yeah. But I saw you very passionate about just, the shootings that are going on around the country. And you said people act like it's never a good time to talk about it.
Yeah, well, every time you hear it, the first thing out of, a lot of politicians' mouths is it's untimely. We can't talk about it. I would tell you, I was just yesterday with Maria Cuomo Cole and another film producer, Kim, and they did this piece off of Newtown, Connecticut, and the aftermath of that shooting. And I'll tell you, when I saw those strong baby bodies being carried out one by one, I just knew that was going to be the moment. And I'll tell you why more than anything I thought it was the moment was largely because those were white babies. It isn't the same. It doesn't pierce the consciousness of the entirety of this country when it's black-on-black violence or when it's violence in urban communities. That was picturesque America, right? And I just knew that's the moment. This is the moment we're going to get real comprehensive gun reform in our communities. And of course, heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak, we're still today with no real comprehensive solutions in this way. In my city, we had an ordinance that said, you cannot shoot guns in city parks, right? Radical. You can't shoot guns in parks where our kids play and our families picnic. And that was so radical a notion that the NRA and their friends in the gun lobby decided to take me to court because Florida law allows it. Not only does it allow me to be taken to court, the legislation actually says for elected officials who attempt to regulate guns, not only can they be personally sued in their individual capacities, which means I got to go out and get my own lawyer instead of my city attorney, even though it was a vote that I took in my capacity as an elected official. I could be fined up to $10,000. I could be responsible for reimbursing the legal fees of the opposing party up to $100,000. And I could be subject to removal from office at the discretion of the governor of the state of Florida. Those are the penalties for going after the gun lobby in my state. Well, the good news is we beat them at the circuit court. We beat them at the appellate court. And by the way, at the appellate court, all the judges were appointed by the sitting Republican governor. So they're not my kind of people, right? And we said we see them in the Supreme Court if they wanted to take it any further. It's unbelievable to me that we can have that kind of violence, everyday violence in our streets and communities, the kind of mass shootings that we just saw the other day, the incidences of Sandy Hook, what we saw in Las Vegas, what gets carried out all over this country, and that the 5 million member NRA has the ability to squelch any meaningful reform is unbelievable to me.
Do you think the gun laws in Florida should change?
Absolutely.
And how so?
Well,
because,
I think
it's very easy to get a license. I mean, I have a license in Florida.
I could believe that. We export them.
And I live in Jersey, which is crazy. My wife has a license in Florida.
Yeah.
So how would you change?
Well,
concealed.
Sure. So first of all, I'm not against people's Second Amendment rights to carry weapons, right? What I am against is that, for instance, in my opinion, I'm not sure that weapons, actually, it's not that I'm not sure. I don't believe that weapons of war deserve to be on our city streets. If you have a gun that can snuff out the lives of 100 people in 90 seconds, you deserve to be in the military, not carrying a gun on our city streets.
So, for instance, an AR-15.
Yeah, well, I don't believe that should be a legal weapon on our city streets. I also believe that people ought to have background checks. I also believe that we ought to close the gun show loophole. I think they're common sense things that, by the way, even NRA members believe that we ought to do.
A mental evaluation.
Absolutely. If you have mental health issues, which, by the way, one of the largest indicators of whether or not you're going to go on to either commit, homicides is whether or not you've got a record of domestic violence situations in your household. Right. And so if you've got a record of continuous domestic violence incidences in your household, I don't believe you ought to be carrying weapons. I don't believe we ought to be permitting you with that, right? And so there comes responsibility with these things. And unfortunately, I think we've gotten so carried away the other way. Our framers had no concept of an AR-15. right? And in fact, there's some strict constitutionalists that look at the reading of that part of our Constitution, and they arrive at a different conclusion around what they meant by the militia and an armed militia, and whether or not that applied to everyday people. That's not my job to litigate. Right. I recognize the Second Amendment, but my only point is that this argument that it is absolute, right, without exception, does not take into consideration how times have changed. Just as the First Amendment is not absolute in the sense that you cannot go into a crowded theater and yell fire or yell gun, right? There are limits, there are constraints, there are bookends on the Constitution, and that's what I think we've got to get back to, some reasoned approach here.
Okay. Well, can I export my vote, man?
Man, I'd love you to come be a 6 and a day, bro.
Maybe I'm biased because you're black, but I don't know.
Oh my goodness,
you talking some good stuff,
yeah,
man.
we agree with a lot of things,
Word up.
and some things
us,
I've never even heard anybody say before.
Well,
so we appreciate that.
For your listeners, and first of all, I want to thank you all for this platform. It is a powerful platform. Your voices are needed more now, not only on just hip hop culture and culture in general, but your salient voices on what's happening, the condition of this country right now could not be more important than the moment that we find ourselves in right now. So I encourage you to keep doing it. And for candidates like me who, again, don't have all the resources, we have to depend on people's willingness from New York and Florida and Georgia and everywhere else to pour into our campaign. So if you want to learn more, I hope you'll visit us at andrewgillum.com. AndrewGillum.com, Andrew, GILLUM.com, and check us out. There's a lot more, and you can absolutely make donations
I'm gonna make a donation,
on that website. That means a lot. I'll take your endorsement, too, if you're prepared to offer it.
You don't want my endorsement.
Yeah, of course I do. We all matter.
I don't know if you want my endorsement.
We appreciate you for joining us, and I just want to say I'm sorry that you went to FAMU.
Come on, man.
And I'm sorry about your Jaguars.
Come on, brother. Listen, look, everybody can't be perfect. And so when you can't be, you go to Hampton.
Wow.
I
anything,
I didn't even see that one coming.
aside from that, anything that we can do to help, though.
That means a lot.
We would love to help. You know, we come to Florida a lot, so we're always all over Miami, Jacksonville.
Absolutely.
And, just all over. So
well, let's figure out a time to be together when y'all are in the state.
Absolutely.
Mean
I'm
a
about
lot.
to make a donation right now.
There it is.
It's Andrew Gillum. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.